Me and Adil are here to tell you about the study that we made thanks to Nice, who asked us to do it, and happy to present the results. To start from the beginning, who are we here today? Gofor, who is an X-Road technology partner, joined up with Stockholm Environmental Institute of Tallinn to do this study, because none of us wouldn't have been able to do it alone. To understand what are the impacts of ICT, you have to understand the solution that you're looking at, and Gofor has an experience in that. But you also need to understand the environmental part, and as an ICT company, that is something where we are not good at. But thankfully, we had partners, and we didn't have Adil alone. We actually had a bunch of very good experts from, say, Tallinn, 7 of them, if I calculated correctly. And that was the way how we did it. So the goal, we start from the generic goal that Nice has set for itself, to have the long-term goal to make the X-Road the most sustainable data exchange solution in the world. Of course, we couldn't study it all, but we started with the basics. We started with the fact that, yes, we know that there are X-Road instances in the world. And we want to look at those instances and have a look how these operate and what are the impacts there. Not looking at Nice as the organizations, but rather X-Road as the solution. And that is actually something new for the way how environmental impacts are looked at, because mostly the traditional way of doing it is we take the organization, we define what we can change, what we can't change, and then take it from there. But in this approach, it was important to understand that X-Road is the ecosystem solution. So it has its environment. It's not one organization. It's hundreds of organizations who use it. And how does that work? Second very important thing for us, and what made it super interesting thing to do for us, is that we really saw that Nice was interested in making the improvement. It's not only about calculating and understanding what is the current situation, and even if the impact is not huge and it's not a bad situation to be in, it was very important for them to really understand how can we improve even if we are doing great. And thirdly, what is the innovative approach that we are all used to, that we think that ICT is the solution, not a problem itself. But that's also one thing that Nice really took to their hearts, is that as long as we don't know how good or bad the solution is, we can't say that, yeah, but we don't care, it's irrelevant. Relevant is that it has good impacts as well. So really being very conscious about the situation and trying to improve it, that is something we don't see too much yet. And how to approach such an innovative research question at the first place. So it was very important for us that we didn't work alone as a provider team, but we really worked in cooperation with Nice stakeholders and also infrastructure providers to get this whole picture. Also, the transparency was super important to us, as we did something that actually has not been done so far in the world, as much as we know. So it was very important for us that we shared the results publicly through Nice blogs and also in the community Slack, and ask for feedback. And thirdly, we don't know the results of the poll yet, but just suggesting that probably many of us don't deal with it daily. Then it was super important for us that whatever we recommend, we have to put it in the context that people who work with X-Road every day can understand. So this user centricity was super important as well. So I just say thank you to all the parties who helped us in this journey, and we couldn't have done it without you. But now more closely of what we did exactly.
Thank you so much, Tuuli. That was a really good insight. It's really important to understand that ICT solutions, of course, they're paving a way to decarbonize a lot of things. And as Tuuli just said, that these are solutions that people don't think of them as problems, but we need to start thinking about this. Why? Because there are different policy measures that are up. The Fit for 55 package is up, which kind of sets goals towards different for different organizations, for different sectors. So the IC sector is no different, and we need to start talking about decarbonizing this sector. So as you can see, what would be the best way to decarbonize any software solution? This could be followed through 3 simple steps, as what we did here. First of all, it's important to understand what the emissions boundary is, or could be. For the X-Road project, this was quite tricky because, again, this is a software solution. If I was to ask people that, what are the emissions of exchanging a certain amount of data, this is a difficult question because people don't have the answer to this. So considering this into account, we had needed to set the emissions boundary first. Once we were able to do this, we started with calculations. There were a lot of assumptions going bit by bit of different infrastructure that is in place. Personal infrastructure, out there, public internet, etc. Once we had the calculations and once we had the results, then we started off with the recommendations part. Some of you might be familiar with this diagram here, the X-Road infrastructure. So it basically just shows that whenever you have a certain data that could be sent by the service provider, it is received by the service consumer through security servers. Right? Now, this lays down the foundation of what the calculations were about. So security servers, they were at the helm of the whole X-Road infrastructure. In order to understand the emissions boundary for any software solution, it can be jotted down in 3 parts. First is the infrastructure that it runs on. Second, the transaction, like whenever you send or exchange some data out through the public internet. That's something that we need to take into account. And third part is storage, which is really upcoming. For the infrastructure part, how X-Road basically runs is security servers, they tend to be the main helm of the X-Road infrastructure. These were the set of assumptions that were taken. I will not go into a lot of details. All of these assumptions are there in the report, but the main ones are using spec data. We can identify or we can set a standard about how a standard server on which X-Road runs on could look like. Another thing that's important is the PUE, which is the power use effectiveness level. It was taken as 1.58 for Estonia and for Finland. This is basically the amount of energy that is consumed to run ICT components and the extra amount of energy that is consumed by data centers or whatever facility that they're placed in. I wouldn't go into a lot of details. So this was the infrastructure part. Next is the transaction part. So as you can see, whenever you exchange data over the public internet, this is an assumption that we can take. So 0.075 kilowatt hours of electricity is consumed. And this was the basic assumption that we moved forward with. Next, storage. Storing your data in cloud has different implications, and storage in hard disk drives, they have different implications. But just for simplicity's sake, we assume that all of the data that was stored in 2020 using X-Road was done in HDDs, right? So this is the landscape that we came across with. This was the emissions boundary. And then we took a lot of assumptions, and there were lots of calculations just to give a snapshot of what the environmental emissions of X-Road could look like. So we built this simplified calculator. We also have a complex version of it. This is open source, anyone can use it. And this is there for X-Road users and for like almost all stakeholders. So they could just directly see what are the environmental impacts. Right, now coming to the results. So for this study, we looked at Estonia and Finland, just a summary of the things that we took into account. The number of servers that are there in Finland, it's around 290. In Estonia, it's 173. The amount of data that was exchanged, we didn't have the actual numbers, but we had to come up with some assumptions. That was done through different stakeholder consultations. And the amount of data that is stored in Estonia was much more. In Finland, it's different. Why is that? Because of message logging and then other kind of operations that are undertaken in both countries. But what I really want to talk about is the emission factor. So Finland has a different emission factor than Estonia, as you can see. So for every kilowatt hour of electricity that is consumed in Finland, the emissions are quite less if we compare the same with Estonia. These numbers are from 2020, but of course they keep on changing, right? But this is one of the major things that I just wanted to point out. Now, if you would see the carbon footprint results of using X-Road, in Estonia, it accounts to around 45,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And in Finland, it's almost half. Although if you would just look at my slide before, and they were like, the infrastructure in Finland is much more, but yet again, the emissions, they are quite different. Now, most of you might not be environmental people, might not know what this means, but let me run you through an example. So let's say we have a person, his name is Josh. His name could be Cindy as well, but whatever. That's right, so just think of this person that if this person takes a flight from Tallinn, there should be a map here, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, so if this person takes a flight from Tallinn and goes to Istanbul and back, in terms of the X-Road environmental impact, this could account up to like 138 round-trip flights. And in terms of the Finnish instance, this could mean 68 round-trip flights. I would say this is not a lot, but it's still doing fine. The good part about the ICT sector is it's still on track with lots of advances that are going on with AI coming in, and with lots of data storage is advancing at quite an exponential rate. So I would still say that we are on track, but just for everyone to know that whenever you are using any kind of ICT solution, there are environmental impacts, which can be quantified in this certain manner. So as Josh is putting his thumbs up, I would still say we're still on track, but that's basically a snapshot here. Lastly, if I was just to summarize the carbon footprint results, as you can see from this slide here, so 96% of the emissions of X-Road, the software, accounts to security server usage, right? 3% are emissions related to storage, 1% is for transmission. These numbers can vary a lot. Again, this was done using lots of different assumptions, but yet again, let's say if you were to change storage, if we start to store everything on cloud, it would be, the implications would be completely different. But here for this study, we assumed that data was stored in HDDs. And regarding this, there are a different set of recommendations, which Tuuli will talk about right now. So they can be followed by all different kind of stakeholders, and to make sure that you are aware of different environmental impacts that ICT solutions have. This study was just done so we can start talking about the environment because of different ICT solutions. So back to you, Tuuli.
Thank you. So about the recommendations. As we said, we presented the recommendations by stakeholders group who could take them into account. So we know that there is Nice who is constantly developing the X-Road core software. So how to do that better? This is one bunch of recommendations. The other part is how could an instance be run better? How could governing authorities make decisions and guide X-Road members in making wiser choices? Thirdly, if you are an X-Road member, how to do things great then and how to improve. And we also had a fourth bunch of recommendations, which we called generic best practice-based recommendations. Because if we look at the numbers, then no matter how well we do in X-Road development, in instance management, and in security server management, it is still vital that we have to use good energy sources, preferably renewable energy sources. And of course, we are also normal people, even if we dig deep into environmental topics or X-Road core. And we understand that also if you live somewhere, you don't select the energy source because you use X-Road. That's not how you do decisions, but anyway, start with the energy source. That's one thing that we all can do, not only when it comes to X-Road, but whatever we do. Second question is, of course, power efficiency in devices that we use. That's also one thing that we can do, and we shouldn't make those decisions because of X-Road, but because of the environment and the climate risks. But when we come to X-Road development part, then what could be improved there? One of the interesting things that actually we found out, and I have my relations with X-Road for 6+ years. Mm-hmm. So I also have my insights that actually there are already options available how to configure X-Road in a more sustainable way. The trick is that sometimes these selections are not easy to do, or we just don't know how to do them. That this is considered a hack, that if you know how to change the configuration and make those selections. So that is something that can be actually improved, not only in code but also in the documentation to explain better what will change when you use different configuration. Secondly, of course, as this is one of the first researches in such field, then building the awareness part is something that could be done. To make, if we currently have an Excel sheet where anyone can go and insert the data and know the outcomes, it would make sense if it would be even easier, because security servers have the data that is important to be inserted there. So if we can just tie them together in an easier way, so it's easy to monitor and easy to understand, are we doing better next year, or how are things progressing? So when we come to instance management, so governing authorities of X-Road instances, then it's very important that governing authorities understand their role, not only in running the central server, but also the role of the ecosystem governance and giving recommendations to the members. I think we had another session here today where we talked about HSMs and how these could be utilized, and the knowledge, and really here also giving those recommendations and guiding members how to do wise choices is very important. Also maybe considering that do everything have to be defined by the governing authority? That's also a question. Knowing the Estonian background, some things have been set in stone for all the members, but actually the reasoning is that probably members can't do wise choices. But if we can help them in making those choices, then we don't have to define them in the beginning that everyone must have HSM, everyone must log everything. We can help them and help them make those decisions based on the services that they are providing or using. And last but not least, the security server management part. Here again, we know that security server management happens within the boundaries of requirements set by governing authorities. So of course, these have to be taken into account. Also, everything we do with security servers is related to data and services that go through that specific security server. So that has to be taken account. And most importantly, we don't have numbers or facts for that recommendations, but it's very important to use the X-Road in a way how it's meant to be used. So really the granularity of X-Road services is the key. It helps to reduce the emissions on two ways. One way is that really one transmission is smaller, but also one thing that we didn't evaluate is the impacts of service developments or impacts of any kind of software developments. But if we can, but granular services can be reused more easily. So there are several reasons why to do that. We also have the link to full report and calculator in the end of our presentation. I believe it will be shared, and then you can click and see all the details yourself. It's just a short summary here. And me and Adil are very happy to work with more of you and just to take this ideological, I can't say the word.
Methodology.
Yeah, the word that Adil just said, further and find how can we measure the impact of ICT more and more and make it a good practice.
Right. Thank you.
Personally, I don't think that's a bad word, by the way. You could have said it, no problem. I know that by many, like, it's maybe seen as a bad word, but I mean, like, when it comes to, in any case, having to address things from a different angle, and necessarily we need to do it from a more environmentally sensitive perspective, then there's nothing wrong about using that word, like ideology. Let's say approach, in any case, like, so that it's maybe like more, it sounds better to the many, to the most. But super interesting presentation. Thanks a lot. I have a lot of questions, and not just from the audience, but also actually myself. One of the things that I was thinking that your presentation made me think of is that sometimes when it comes to the adoption of technological solutions or ICTs, we might think of the savings, let's say, or of the advantages that we're getting on one aspect of the environmental impact equation, let's say, but then not on another one. For example, I remember this very clearly, that I've read in many like leaflets and, like, I don't know, marketing materials, that, I don't know, like using technological solutions like decreases the use of paper by this much. Yeah, but maybe like it increases the use of electricity by this other much, like a much more, let's say. And that is maybe something that is overlooked sometimes. What do you think about it? That there is not a very like encompassing approach to the environmental impact of technological solutions. What do you think about that?
Do you want me to take this, or?
Take Adil.
Right, sure. Thank you so much. I agree that this is something that's kind of overlooked, but I would say that this is upcoming. We are replacing traditional way of working with ICT solutions, and I do believe that it's going pretty fine. We are able to cut down emissions by a lot, but what people are not focusing on is what by making this jump towards ICT solutions, what's the environmental impact. It's not only about emissions, but also about life cycle assessment of different ICT components. Let's say throwing away your laptop or your phone or your keyboard, it has some different toxic metals inside, and then that also and affects the environment. So this is something that's not looked into, and this is what we hoped to achieve, just to get this debate ongoing. But yet again, I can't really say that what exactly are the cost-benefit analysis, or what's the contrast here, unless this field is not really looked into. But this is certainly, some companies are doing this thing, and this is like this is a good step in the right direction.
And then I would say also now to go and look at what the audience, what is the opinion of the people in the audience. So if I can ask to send on the screen and see like the results of the poll that we opened before, we asked you to complete the sentence. Environmental impact of ICT is with one of the following options. We have someone who thinks not anything I think of, or like an important part of my daily weekly work. I think that is like the two, as it usually happens, like the distribution of most of the answers is in the middle, of course. So we have an even distribution of like 7 and 7 people who have answered like important to me, but not something that I could change. So maybe like a bit this feeling of, like I'm just one, what can I do about it? And the other answer of something I have thought of already and I have planned to work on. You have shown with your study and also with the recommendations, though, that there is something that we can do about it. So implementing like the technological solutions and ICTs, apart from like having to be like just sort of like milestones in the way that we change the way that we work, not just like in the private sector, but also in the public administrations, then it also means that there are a number of other things that are many things that are simplified, but a number of other things that are made a bit more complex and that we need to take into consideration. Now, someone else is saying, an important part of my daily weekly, is that one of your colleagues? No?
Don't know.
Yeah, true. We cannot know that. What do you think about these results? I think the even distribution in the middle is like a kind of a staple of almost every survey. But
I must say that I am positively surprised. Actually, positively surprised.
Numbers are changing because people
really,
are answering.
to see that there are many people out there who have thought about it. That's already something, and I really hope that this study will give at least a few ideas what could be done in our daily work, and what are the things that we can improve. Because I honestly believe in constant improvement. It's not saying that something is good or bad, but rather what can we really do about it, and how can we improve it.
One of the questions that we're getting from the audience is also partly connected to this, which is, and to the design part, let's say, of these technological solutions. For example, someone is asking, is it possible to consider environmental questions as part of architectural decisions in the software development process? So should the developers and architects learn more about this subject? And my personal addition to this, should they also maybe collaborate more with people who know more than them about the subject? What would you say?
I say that definitely they should, and actually it is not hard thing to do. It might be, or it might sound hard thing to do if you just think that, okay, now I have to read the whole internet through and get familiar with the subject. But actually there are experts out there who can help you, and these first drafts of what are the most important aspects for that cause environmental impacts in your specific case. This can be actually done in a workshop format that lasts for 1 or 2 hours only. And once you have this glimpse of how things are and what is important, you can already continue from there.
Someone asked instead another question that also came up to my mind for a moment when you were presenting the results, or rather the methodology, let's say, for measuring and comparing then the two countries. The question goes as follows. Your comparison is based on absolute terms, but Estonia has a lot more transaction volume than Finland. So what is the proportional amount of emissions when you compare it against the volume of transactions?
So if I okay. So if I get this question correctly, it's much more about a comparison between emissions due to transaction.
Yeah, I think is it possible? I would take let's take a couple of minutes to address this, because this is important, I think, in order to understand the study. So maybe is it possible to send the presentation again on? Because I think this part was in the slides about the data.
It's like 0.075 kilowatt hour per GB of data. That's the that's the energy consumption for emissions. So you could directly see, even if you have like a lot of volume, but right now if you if the data is being sent over.
Stop. I think sorry, I'm stopping for a second, because I see that I see the presentation passing in front of me, and I think it's the part. The slides before, 2 slides before. Yeah, 2, 3 slides before this.
You go back, please.
Yeah, go back.
Back.
Go back a little more.
Yeah, here?
And I think the previous one, actually.
Previous one.
Was a...
Yeah, could you go back?
Yeah, go back a little more. A little more.
Previous slide.
Yeah, the previous slide.
Yeah,
I think it was this one.
Yeah.
Can we show it also to the audience, like this one, exactly this one. So it's here.
So
because what was pointed out is the fact that the volume essentially is very different, and so that might be what determines the fact that Estonia
actually the volume is pretty similar.
Yeah, you would say, but even if this was like a lot, in one of my slides I showed the amount of energy that is consumed when you are sending data over the public internet. It's quite small, it's marginal. So you can send a lot more data.
0.00075.
It's like 0.075, I showed it in my slides.
Yeah, but let's stick to this one otherwise.
yeah. But that's the case. So I thought that data transaction was an issue as well, but once we really dived into the whole study, we understood that data transaction is not really the problem. Either it's storage or it is running the security servers. But here in this In this study, we did not consider storage over the cloud, but we considered storage, in your own personal hard drives. But one more thing, sorry, I just wanted to add, just as a recommendation to everyone. If you use cloud storage, that is much more energy intensive, and you don't know where your data centers would be or where the data is being stored, so it has to travel like lots and lots of kilometers, and it consumes a lot of energy. So that's much more intensive. So if you can store as much data with your in your own hard disk drives, that is a good recommendation that I would give.
Okay, perfect. Adil and Tuuli, thanks a lot. We already went a little bit over, but it was a super interesting research and interesting questions as well. Thanks also for expressing your opinion in the poll. There are a couple of questions that have been asked from the audience that we've not managed to address, but first of all, you can find the description of the results of the study in the NICE blog. So if you go to the blog of the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, you will find basically an argumented and elaborated blog about the results of the study and the study itself. Second, Tuuli is reachable through the virtual expo. So if you go to the virtual expo to go for, you will see Tuuli's contacts, and you can have the chance to chat with her. But thanks a lot for having joined us. Very, very interesting approach and angle to the topic of Exford.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.